So once you found yourself in the Linux environment for the first time, it's important to be able to get your bearings about what's going on the operating system. So let's take some time to learn our first commands when running on the Linux operating system so we can get our bearings and understand the greater system as a whole. First command I always like folks to run is who am I? We'll run this with all one words and press enter. And this is going to give you information on who your user is. Now this is important for a couple of reasons. The first reason is this. We can see everything over here to the left of the $sign. This is what's called your bash prompt on the Linux operating system. This bash prompt can vary wildly depending on what operating system you might be on or even what specific virtual machine you're on. You may get just the $sign. You may get nothing at all. This one happens to be nice, and it gives me a username and it gives me the host name of what machine I'm connected to. That is not always the case. Using who am I is a great way to get a sanity check to make sure you're acting as the user you think you are. Which brings me to the second reason why this is important. Remember that operating systems can support multiple users who have different privileges. You may be an admin user, a privileged user, or you may be an unprivileged user. It's important to understand what user you are acting as before you start taking actions on the operating system. So while this may seem like overkill at first glance, believe me, this is an important command to have in your back pocket. Next command that's important to run is going to be the date command. Okay, and the date is pretty much what you think it is. It is going to print out the current date and time of the operating system. Again, a very simple command, but can be a very good one to have in your back pocket. Typically, when we're working on a Linux operating system, we're working in a server environment. You may get a server from a Google or an Amazon or Microsoft of the world. Your server and its time may not be in the time zone that you expect it to be. And when you are running software and code and applications that are dependent on time, it's important to note that everything in that software is going to be timestamp referenced by that server. So you may need to make corrections. You may have things break unexpectedly. So another command that's kind of deceptively simple, but does have long-term implications if you don't check it once in a while and understand the state of the system. So we know who we are. We know the date. Let's kind of figure out where we are. We find ourselves in an environment where we don't have like a menu. We don't have icons that we can click on. We don't have folders to reference. So the way for us to find out where we actually are in space is by running print working directory, or pwd. And what this is doing is this is going to print out where we are in the operating system. So we'll start from the right-hand side and I'll work our way back. Note, first thing we see is the /DA129. That means we are inside of a directory or a folder called DA129. That in turn is inside of another directory called home. Now, this / here is just simply separating the directories, and that's what the / does, with the exception of the very first / in the path. This is actually called the root directory, and the root directory is as high as you can go on the machine. If you went any higher, you would blow a hole through the damn thing, and then you would be out in space, right? So it's important to know that this first one here is in fact the root directory. So now that we know where we are, let's see if we can find anything interesting in our current directory, like files. If I type in ls, it's going to list out everything in my directory. Now, I happen to be on a brand new virtual machine, so I'm not surprised that there is nothing here. However, many commands we run will have optional parameters called flags. And what does a flag look like? If I use the same ls command and I give it the flag of -a and press enter, interesting. All of a sudden, now it looks like there's something going on in my home directory. So in this case, I gave ls the optional flag of a, which means all. So now I can see various files and folders that are all hidden. Hidden files and hidden directories on your machine are always going to be prefixed with this dot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we can't interact with these files or folders. It's just they're kind of there so we don't accidentally do things with them. Later on, we will work with these files, we will work with these directories, but for now we'll just know that they're there. Another handy thing we can do, which will come later in the scripting, is we can print out to the screen. If I use the echo command, it will repeat anything I put into the screen back out. So if I echo hello, it will print it back to me. A fairly basic command, but this is going to be coming in handy much later once we start creating bash scripts. Another good thing to know is typically when we get onto these machines, we run a bunch of commands, we leave, we go home for the day, we have coffee, we do whatever, and we come back. We need to have some sort of sense of what did I do? We may have forgotten what a command was, or perhaps we have forgotten what order we did things in. For that, we are going to invoke a command called history. The history command is very nice because it is going to give you a breakdown of all the commands that your current user ran on your machine. And again, this can be helpful to remember, hey, which of these commands did I run last, or what was the name of that long command, or what order did I run things in? A nice pro tip that I will tell you with history is you'll notice that they all have these little numbers next to them. Now, my history right now is pretty simple because it's just 8. But I want you to imagine, once you start getting into the thousands and you have commands that might be several hundred characters long, an easy way to run that is by using the exclamation mark and the number you want to run. So if I wanted to run print working directory again, I could do exclamation mark and the number 4. If I do that and press enter, sure enough, we can see that it invoked the command and I also got the result. Last thing we'll talk about is I've got a cluttered screen. How do I get rid of that cluttered screen? Another nice quality of life command is going to be clear. If I type in the clear command and I press enter, that's going to clear out my screen and give me a fresh working space. This is going to be very useful, especially once we start getting into debugging, generating logs, and that sorts of things. So now you have kind of the basics understandings of some of the first commands you want to use to get to know the operating system and to understand your bearings.